If you saw Ava Bennett walking down the street, you'd probably think she'd always belonged in the kind of life people dream about. She had that look. Calm, polished, untouchable. She moved like a woman who had never had to check a price tag before picking something up. She could walk into a boardroom, and men twice her age would sit up straighter without even realizing it. She had a penthouse in Chicago, a silent black electric car, and a company that business magazines kept calling one of the fastest growing private brands in America. At 34, Ava was the founder and CEO of a luxury home organization company, but that business didn't start with investors, connections, or family money. It started with one folding table, a borrowed label printer, and a dream that was way too stubborn to die. And still, none of that was the part that kept her awake at night. Not the pressure, not the competition, not the money. What kept her awake was something else. She had built such a strong life on the outside that nobody believed she could still feel lonely inside it. And maybe the worst part was this. The men she dated never really seemed interested in who she had been before the success. They liked the finished version. The woman in the tailored coat, the woman with assistants, press coverage, and a skyline view, the woman they could show off. Some men admired her, some were intimidated by her, and some treated dating her like they had somehow won the startup lottery. Then there were the worst ones. The men who tried to compete with her. One boyfriend once laughed and said, "Dating you feels like dating LinkedIn in heels." He thought it was funny. Ava didn't. Another man remembered her net worth better than her birthday. And one guy, after 11 months together and way too much champagne, actually asked if she'd consider combining assets in a smart way. Ava had just stared at him and thought, you don't want a wife, you want a merger. So when her last relationship fell apart, loudly, painfully, and publicly, with enough passive-aggressive Instagram posts to qualify as performance art, Ava did what a lot of high-functioning, heartbroken women do. She worked more, harder, longer, colder, expansion meetings, launch plans, investor dinners, brand campaigns, interviews, photo shoots, and every time someone asked how she was doing, she smiled and said, "I'm just focused on growth right now." And technically, that was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was, she had started wondering if real love only happened for people who still looked ordinary enough to be truly seen. Because Ava hadn't been ordinary in a very long time, but she had once been poor, and not the cute kind of poor people romanticized later. Not the, we didn't have much, but we had love kind. No. Ava grew up in southern Indiana, in a trailer with a leaking roof. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner. Her father drifted in and out of construction jobs and apologies. There were winters when the heat didn't work, summers when the fridge held nothing but eggs, ketchup, and hope. At 12 years old, Ava learned how to smile and say she wasn't hungry, so her little brother could have the last grilled cheese. At 15, she worked weekends at a gas station. At 17, she got into college on scholarships, cleaned office buildings at night, and studied marketing between shifts while eating vending machine crackers for dinner. Nobody handed her anything. Every piece of her life she dragged uphill herself. And maybe that was exactly why she couldn't stand the thought of being loved, only for the view from the top. Then, one rainy Thursday, a few months after that breakup, she met Daniel Calloway, not at a gala, not at a charity event, not through some polished friend of a polished friend. She met him in a small bookstore cafe where she had gone to hide from her own life. She was wearing jeans, sneakers, and an oversized gray sweatshirt. No real makeup, just leftover mascara and exhaustion. Her assistant thought she was at a strategy lunch. Her CFO thought she was reviewing warehouse proposals. In reality, Ava was sitting in the corner, drinking burnt coffee, pretending to read a novel she had been stuck on the same page of for 20 minutes. That's when the man at the next table looked over and said, "You've been on page 42 long enough that I'm trying to decide if the book emotionally destroyed you or if you're just very distracted." Ava looked up. He was handsome, but in a way that should have been annoying, except he didn't seem to know it. Late 30s maybe, tall, dark hair, rolled up sleeves, expensive watch, tired eyes, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in an ad for custom suits or inherited money. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Maybe I'm just a slow reader." He glanced at the upside-down bookmark sticking out of the book. "And maybe I'm the Queen of England." Ava laughed before she could stop herself. "Well," she said, closing the book, "unless you've got some breaking royal news. I guess you caught me." He held out his hand. "Daniel." "Ava." He nodded toward the counter. "Can I buy you a coffee as an apology for publicly exposing your fake reading habit?" She almost said no. Then she almost said yes, as herself. Ava Bennett, CEO, successful, recognizable, guarded. But instead, for reasons she wouldn't fully understand until much later, she said something else. "Only if you don't mind that I can't stay long. I've got work later." Daniel smiled. "What do you do?" And right there, that was the moment, the tiny hinge that swung open the whole story. Ava looked at him, really looked at him, the good shoes, the easy confidence, the sadness behind the smile, and suddenly, she didn't want to watch recognition show up in his face. She didn't want him Googling her later. She didn't want to become impressive before she became real. So she lied. "I work at a discount home goods store," she said. "Inventory, stocking shelves, nothing exciting." Daniel looked at her and smiled. Not a pity smile, not a fake nice guy smile, just warmth. "That sounds honest," he said. Ava blinked. "Honest?" "Yeah, real work, sore feet, weird customers, a manager who probably uses the word teamwork right before ruining your day." She laughed. "You're weirdly specific." "My family owns hotels," he said. "I grew up around people who called the front desk because their room was too quiet." That got a real laugh out of her. And just like that, she stayed. They talked for an hour, then 2. Daniel told her he came from old money, East Coast old money, the kind where summer homes get referred to by state, not address. His father had turned family wealth into a luxury hotel empire. Now Daniel ran one division of it, though he never talked about it like he was proud. When the conversation drifted toward relationships, Ava noticed the shift in his face. "I've had women act like they love me," he said quietly. "Then later I find out what they really loved was the Aspen House and the club membership." Ava took a sip of coffee. "Maybe you should date women without telling them you're rich." He gave a crooked smile. "Hard to do when your last name opens doors. Before you do." "Fair." Then he looked at her. "What about you?" She should have told him the truth right there. Instead, she shrugged. "Nothing dramatic. I've just learned that people can fall in love with the version of you that fits into their life. He looked at her like he understood more than she had said. That should have scared her. Instead, it made her want to stay. They exchanged numbers. 3 nights later, they had dinner at a small family-owned Italian place, where the wine list fit on one page, and the waitress called everybody honey. Ava wore a simple black dress from an old department store line she hadn't touched in years. She left her watch at home because it cost more than some people's rent, and she was starting to realize that pretending to be broke took a surprising amount of planning. She stopped driving her own car. She started taking Ubers. She avoided designer labels. She used her middle name, Rose. When making reservations, she told her assistant to say she was in private strategy blocks. If Daniel ever wanted to see her during certain hours, it was ridiculous, dishonest, and to her own horror, it was also the happiest she had been in years. Because around Daniel, she wasn't a headline. She was just a woman he wanted to know. He brought her soup when she said she was sick. He listened when she talked about growing up broke, because those parts were true. He laughed when she admitted she had once Googled how to look rich at a scholarship banquet. Daniel nearly choked laughing. What did it say? Ava smiled. Basically, stand up straight and don't attack the breadbasket like it insulted your family. Daniel laughed so hard he had to put his glass down. One night, walking by the river, he said something that stopped her cold. I feel safe with you. Ava stopped walking. Nobody had ever said that to her like it was a gift. That was the moment. The lie started to hurt for real, because Daniel was falling in love with a woman who did exist, just not exactly the way he thought. And Ava was falling in love with a man who believed honesty mattered more than image, while she had built their relationship on a false beginning. She tried more than once to tell him. Every time, fear got there first. Then came the parents. Daniel invited her to Sunday dinner at his family's estate outside Lake Forest. Estate was the polite word. That place looked like a university and a museum had gotten married. Ava stood at the front entrance in a pale blue dress, staring at stone columns and lawns so perfect they looked fake. Daniel squeezed her hand. You okay? She exhaled. Your house has its own climate. He laughed. That bad? Daniel, I'm pretty sure the hedges here have better health care than most Americans. That made him laugh, and for a second, her nerves eased. His father, Richard Calloway, was exactly what she expected. Silver hair, perfect posture, handshake like a contract, polite but observant. He looked like the kind of man who would notice a crooked spoon from across the room. But Daniel's mother, Eleanor, surprised her. Yes, she was elegant, but she was also warm. She kissed Ava on the cheek, held both her hands, and said, Daniel hasn't smiled this much in years. For that alone, I'm already grateful to you. Ava nearly burst into tears right there in the foyer, which would have been both embarrassing and terrible for her mascara. Dinner started beautifully. Roasted salmon, summer vegetables, candles, old family silver, and enough forks to make Ava briefly wonder if one of them was just ceremonial. Richard asked calm, careful questions. Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Do you enjoy your work? And Ava answered, with half-truths. Southern Indiana. Her mother worked in a diner. Her father did construction. And yes, she worked in home goods retail. Eleanor listened with real sympathy. By dessert, she reached across the table and said softly, My dear, Daniel told me a little about your background. You've worked very hard. I admire that. Ava swallowed. Thank you. Then Eleanor said something Ava never saw coming. This may be forward, but Richard and I have a foundation that quietly helps young women from difficult backgrounds. Education, housing, career support. If you ever wanted to go back to school, train for something new, or build a bigger future, I would be honored to help. The room went still. Daniel looked touched, even proud of his mother. Richard gave one approving nod, and Ava felt all the blood leave her face, because it wasn't the offer that hurt, it was the kindness. Kindness has a way of slipping past every wall and landing right in the wound you thought money had already healed. For 1 second, Ava saw her mother's tired hands, her little brother's worn-out sneakers, herself at 19, standing in a store aisle, trying to figure out if she could afford shampoo and still have enough left for bus fare. Her throat tightened. "That's incredibly generous," she said. And before she could figure out how to escape that moment gracefully, a woman's voice cut through the room from the entry hall. "Well, that is the most expensive minimum wage employee I have ever seen." Ava froze. Every muscle in her body locked. Daniel turned first. Megan? Standing in the doorway, still in a raincoat and holding an umbrella, was Megan Hart, a lifestyle journalist, a minor socialite, and one of Ava's least favorite women in Chicago. Megan had interviewed her at a Women in Business event 6 months earlier and spent the entire evening calling her the Storage Queen, which somehow sounded like both a compliment and an insult. Eleanor stood up. "Megan, I didn't realize you were coming by. I was in the city and thought I'd drop off those gala committee papers," she said. Then she looked directly at Ava. "But wow, this is unexpected." Ava could hear her own heartbeat. Daniel frowned. "You two know each other?" Megan gave a short laugh. "Know each other. Daniel, this is Ava Bennett." And then silence. Not normal silence, the kind that feels like glass breaking. Megan kept going, not realizing she had just thrown a match into a room full of gas. She owns Bennett Living. She was on the cover of Midwest Entrepreneur last fall, unless this is her evil twin, which honestly would explain the slightly different hair. Nobody moved. Eleanor slowly lowered her hand from her wine glass. Richard leaned back in his chair, with the expression of a man whose worst assumptions about people had just been confirmed. And Daniel just looked at Ava, not angry, not yet, and somehow that was worse. Finally, Megan whispered, "Should I not have said that?" Ava answered quietly. "No, you probably should have." Daniel stood. "Ava, is that true?" And there it was, the moment she had been dreading, the moment she had earned. She could have minimized it, explained too fast, defended herself too soon. Instead, she looked him in the eyes and said, "Yes." The hurt on his face hit harder than anger would have. "You lied to me." "Yes." "From the beginning?" "Yes." He stared at her, like he was trying to find the woman he thought he knew. "My God," Eleanor whispered. Richard spoke in a cool voice. "This is exactly why discretion matters, Daniel." But Daniel wasn't listening to him. "Why?" he asked, never taking his eyes off Ava. Ava stood so fast, her chair scraped the floor. "Because I wanted one thing in my life that wasn't about money." Daniel let out one sharp, disbelieving laugh. "So you lied to a man who told you he'd been used for money because you wanted something honest?" Ava's voice shook. "When you say it out loud like that, yes," It sounds awful. Because it is awful. He wasn't yelling. That made it worse. Tears were already burning behind her eyes. I know, she said. I know. Richard stood too. Daniel, this conversation can happen another time. No, Daniel snapped. I want to hear it now. So Ava told the truth. All of it. She told him about growing up poor, about men who loved her status instead of her soul, about how success had turned her into a symbol instead of a person, about that day in the bookstore when she panicked at the thought of being recognized before being known. I didn't do it for your money, she said, her voice trembling. I already had money. I did it because I was terrified that if you met the successful version of me first, you'd never really see me clearly. I know how twisted that sounds. I know it was wrong, but everything I felt for you was real. Daniel's jaw tightened. You should have trusted me with the truth. Ava nodded, tears slipping down now. I should have. Eleanor looked heartbroken. Richard looked cold. Megan looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole umbrella and all. Ava reached for her purse. I'm sorry, she said, and those words felt way too small for the damage in the room. Then she looked at Eleanor, and your offer was beautiful. Thank you. She didn't say anything else to Daniel, because there are moments when love doesn't need one more speech. It needs consequences. So she left in the rain. For 2 weeks, Daniel didn't call. For 2 weeks, Ava worked like a machine and grieved like someone had ripped something living out of her chest. She signed contracts, approved campaigns, smiled in meetings, gave instructions, made decisions. Then she'd go home, sit on her kitchen floor, and eat dry cereal out of the box, because heartbreak, apparently, does not care how expensive your apartment is. She typed out texts and deleted them, practiced apologies, and hated every version. And over, she kept thinking the same thing. The cruelest part of all was that she had finally found the kind of love she'd been praying for, and then ruined it with the exact thing she claimed to hate. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, her assistant buzzed her office. There's a Daniel Calloway here to see you. Ava stood up so fast, she nearly knocked her chair over. Send him in. Daniel walked into her office and stopped. For the first time, he saw all of it. The glass walls, the skyline, the framed awards, the quiet machinery of the life she had hidden from him. He looked around, then gave a small, bitter smile. So, this is where the discount home goods empire operates. Ava almost smiled. I deserve that. Yes, he said. You do. He didn't sit. Neither did she. After a long silence, Daniel reached into his coat pocket, pulled something out, and set it on her desk. It was the upside-down bookstore bookmark from the day they met. I kept this, he said. I was trying to decide whether to throw it away. Ava looked at it and felt her throat close. Daniel, he lifted a hand. Let me finish. She nodded. I was furious, he said. Not because you were successful. That part never mattered. I was furious because I told you exactly where I was wounded, and you walked right into that wound anyway. Ava closed her eyes for a second. I know. But then, my mother said something. Ava looked up. His voice softened. She said, a woman who lies to take your money is dangerous. A woman who lies because she's terrified you'll never love the poor girl she used to be is just someone living heartbroken in advance. Ava's lips trembled. Daniel let out a quiet breath. My father called that psychological nonsense, he said. which is how we all knew she was right. Ava laughed through her tears. Daniel took a step closer. I'm still hurt, he said, and trust doesn't magically come back just because we missed each other. I know, but I missed you. Those words hit her like sunlight after weeks of rain. He looked around the office, then back at her. I came here because I realized something. You didn't pretend to be broke because you wanted access to a richer life. You already had one. You did it because you thought love had to meet you at rock bottom to be real. A tear slid down Ava's cheek. And maybe, he said, I wasn't much better. I kept saying I wanted a simple girl, but maybe that was my own mask. Maybe what I really wanted was someone whose love I didn't have to doubt, and I confused that with simplicity. Ava whispered, I never cared about your money. I know that now. The room fell quiet, but this time it was a softer kind of silence. Not the kind that destroys, the kind you can rebuild inside. I should have told you the truth, Ava said. You should have. I was scared. I know. She gave a shaky little laugh. You keep saying that like it fixes things. It doesn't, he said. Then he stepped closer and took her hands. But it's honest, and honest is at least a place to start. She looked at him and saw everything at once. Pain, caution, love, hope, like all of them had somehow agreed to stand in the same room together. Why did you really come here? She asked softly. A slow smile touched his mouth. Well, first, my mother wanted me to let you know that her foundation board unanimously agrees you are currently very overqualified for financial assistance. Ava laughed through her tears. And second, he held her hands more tightly. Second, I came to ask if you'd be willing to start over. No lies, no roles, no tests, no pretending either one of us is smaller than we really are. And that was when Ava cried differently, not from grief, from relief. Yes, she whispered. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in a long, long time, Ava let herself be held without acting strong. 6 months later, Daniel met her mother in Indiana. He ate diner pie like he was having a religious experience and helped repair the porch railing with the exact kind of enthusiasm rich men get when they're trying very hard to prove they are not decorative. Eleanor and Ava became genuinely close. Richard stayed cautious for a while, until the day he watched Ava shut down a predatory vendor in a contract negotiation with the calm brutality of a woman who had survived on vending machine crackers and sheer willpower. After that, he told Daniel, "She terrifies me. Marry her." Even Megan, to her credit, sent flowers with a note that said, "Sorry for accidentally detonating your life. The peonies were expensive." A year later, under string lights in the garden behind Eleanor's foundation event, Daniel proposed. No orchestra, no giant speech, no public spectacle. Just the two of them standing near a fountain while laughter drifted from the party in the distance. He took her hand and said softly, "You were never too much. You were just loved by people too small to hold all of you." Ava started crying immediately, which annoyed her a little, because she had once imagined she'd be the kind of woman who looked elegant during a proposal. Instead, she looked like someone who had been emotionally hit by a truck. Daniel smiled and reached into his pocket. "And also, if you say no, my mother is probably going to adopt you anyway, so this is mostly a formality." Ava laughed and cried at the same time. "Then yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." They got married the following spring, And when people later asked how they met, Ava and Daniel would smile at each other. Sometimes Daniel would say, "At a bookstore, she was pretending to read," and Ava would add, "and he was pretending not to be emotionally damaged." But the truth was actually simpler than either version. They met at the exact moment when two wounded people stopped asking, "Will I be chosen for the wrong reasons?" and finally asked something braver. "Will I let myself be fully known?" Because real love doesn't begin when you make yourself smaller, or poorer, or easier, or quieter. And it does not become safer when you hide your scars behind money, beauty, charm, or control. Real love begins where the performance ends. Ava spent years climbing out of poverty, then years climbing into success. But the hardest climb of all was learning that she did not need to become less extraordinary in order to be loved honestly. She just needed someone brave enough to love the whole truth, and someone worthy of hearing it.